Hare Krishna. Welcome to everyone who is joining us online today. Welcome to the 11th Annual BBT Africa Conference. My name is Mukundangri Das, and I am the facilitator of this first session that we are having to open up our conference today. So, by way of introduction, I'd like to welcome all the attendees that are watching online, both in our Zoom webinar session and as well on our Facebook live stream. We are honored and very privileged to have you on board, joining us today. And for the weekend, we'll be having sessions spread out through the course of the day. Today, including tomorrow, with a lot of special guests that you can expect. So we are in a very special time in the world. Of course, it has been a tumultuous time over the last 6 months with the state of the world. And this has resulted in a very special conference being held this year in 2020 for BBT Africa. This conference has gone across the continent, in every corner of the continent, but this one is special and significant because of its online platform. We're able to reach a lot more devotees, not just across the continent, but globally. So we'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us from whichever part of the world that you are watching this from. So this online platform and us being in quarantine over the last couple of months, dealing with the state of the world, the global pandemic, has offered us a very unique opportunity. And that's the opportunity to really introspect and come closer to Srila Prabhupada through his books. And this year's conference has been designed to help us with that meditation and also give us the tools to be able to share that message in Srila Prabhupada's books with the rest of the world. So in order to commence this conference, we'd like to invoke the mercy and the blessings of the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, by sharing this video in honor of Srila Prabhupada with all of you.
Vandeham Shri Guru Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavansha Shri Rupam Chakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Caitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanitanscha Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
So we have to simply take instruction from Guru, and if we execute that to our heart and soul, that is success. That is practical. I have no personal qualification, but I simply try to satisfy my Guru. That's all. My Guru Maharaj asked me that if you get some money, you print books. So, there was a private meeting talking, some of my important God brothers also there, it was in Radha Kunda. So, Guru Maharaj was speaking to me that since we have got this Bhagavajar marble temple, there has been so many dissensions. And everyone is thinking, we'll occupy this room or that room, that room. I wish therefore to sell this temple and the marble and print some book. Yes. So I took up this from his mouth, that he is very fond of books. And he told me personally that if you get some money, print books. Therefore I am stressing on this point. Where is book? Where is book? Where is book? So kindly help me. This is my request. Print as many books in as many languages and distribute throughout the whole world. Then Krishna consciousness movement will automatically increase.
Thank you. Fundamental to Srila Prabhupada's mission has been the translation of his books. And over the last week, we've had to learn and come to terms with the loss of one of Srila Prabhupada's generals in his army, someone who was fundamental in translating Srila Prabhupada's books into the Bengali language, His Holiness Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj. So we'd like to take a moment within this conference to pay tribute to Maharaj's life and take lessons from his example. So at this point, I'd like to call upon the senior trustee of BBT Africa, His Grace Govardhana Prabhu, who will say a short tribute to His Holiness Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj, and from there we'll proceed on to a tribute video for His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. Thank you, Govardhana Prabhu. Welcome.
Hare Krishna Mukundangri Prabhu, thank you very much. So the African BBT dedicates this 11th annual BBT conference as a very fitting tribute to His Holiness Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, a visionary personality whose disappearance has left us all very broken-hearted. Maharaj was a Vaikuntha gentleman, a role model of pure devotional service, a bhushan. He was an ornament amongst the Vaishnavas. His devotional accomplishments will be recorded in the history books of ISKCON. And when that anthology of devotional appreciations is compiled, Maharaj's contribution will be celebrated. From being instantly recognized by Srila Prabhupada, then having got sannyas within 3 months of his Harinam Diksha, to immortalizing Srila Prabhupada through cinema, and for building such a beautiful temple for ISKCON within such a short time. Maharaj worked tirelessly for the fortification and the unity of ISKCON. And while the Vaishnavas in the world, we struggle with such a devastating loss, it's indeed a very devastating loss, we fondly remember Maharaj for having fulfilled Srila Prabhupada's sacred order. This order Maharaj received on his first personal encounter with Srila Prabhupada, sitting right next to him on a train. Some 22 years later, Maharaj had fulfilled this order by translating all of Srila Prabhupada's major works into Bengali. As you know, Bengali is the 7th most spoken language in the world. And Maharaj has always taken an interest in the African BBT. He's even printed his own very cherished memories of Srila Prabhupada with the North American BBT, a book called The Ocean of Mercy. So on this occasion, on this 11th annual BBT conference, we offer this as a tribute to His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj. The video that you're about to see will be digitalized for posterity, and in that way Maharaj will forever remain a part of the African BBT. Let us now watch this video. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada is the founder Acharya, Prabhupada's position of the founder Acharya. Because I consider that it is very important for us to recognize Prabhupada's very special position in ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada is not only the founder of ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada is the Acharya of ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada is the Guru of ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada is the Guru of all the devotees of ISKCON, of all. This understanding is very important for us.
But then I came across a book by Srila Prabhupada,
Yes.
called The Nectar of Devotion. And when I started to read it, practically from the very first page, everything became
It made sense to you.
Yeah, it
Okay.
made sense to me. Like, I was aspiring for liberation those days.
Yes.
The goal of life was to become liberated.
Sona
This is the life story of that great personality in whose memory this monument has been built.
Thank you, Govardhana Prabhu, for sharing that tribute to His Holiness Bhakti Charan Maharaj with us. BBT Africa would like to again extend its gratitude to His Holiness Bhakti Charan Maharaj for his guidance and mentorship throughout the years, and his personal and very loving association that he has given us. Your presence will be sorely missed, Maharaj. Then we now move on to the second installment of our session today. We have a very, very special guest with us, one of the strongest proponents of Srila Prabhupada's movement and its establishment in South Africa, His Holiness Srila Bhakti Caitanya Maharaj. Srila Bhakti Caitanya Maharaj is a disciple of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Maharaj is also one of 3 executive members of the Governing Body Commission. He is the co-GBC of Mauritius, Northwest Russia, Eastern Siberia, Western Siberia, Latvia, Southern Africa, and Lithuania. Maharaj, we are very glad to have you on. We always look forward to having you on and just your presence as a friend of the BBT. So Maharaj will share a few words with us of encouragement for the rest of the conference that we have planned for this weekend. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shmati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj ki jai. Thank you very much for inviting me to come. I appreciate that. I have attended personally one or a couple actually of these annual conferences, although previously before the lockdown I was traveling too much to get to every one of them, although I really would have liked to. So I'm very happy to be able to be here personally for this one. Book distribution, book production and distribution is very dear to all of Prabhupada's followers. And these things are very dear to me personally also. For some years, it was about 4 years, say, I was running a BBT division in England, and we produced a few million books and distributed, and I was getting them all printed and everything, and getting the book distributors supplied. And prior to that, in my first years at least in Krishna consciousness, from early 73 till about the middle of 76, I was out on book distribution pretty much every day. And I remember that talk of Srila Prabhupada's, which you played the video of. Prabhupada is asking the devotees that to please print books, print book, print book, print book. I want book. Not the video, but at least the recording of that audio that was distributed all around the world at the time, right, like the same day that Prabhupada spoke that. And because in those days, of course, there was no email, internet, all of these things. Things had to be physically sent from wherever to anywhere. So every now and then we would get, every temple in ISKCON would get something in the mail from Prabhupada. And I remember when that came in the mail, we were already, the mood of distributing books and the idea that this was extremely dear to Prabhupada and very important for us, that was gradually developed and spread from, you know, I joined right at the beginning of 73. It was just starting that we should distribute books. And so it gradually built up until it actually became more or less like a fever, that how to distribute books. We must distribute books. Prabhupada wants us to distribute books. So it was all pervading in the culture of ISKCON at that time, really very all pervading, particularly say through 74, then 75, and then 76, and into 77. It was such a huge thing that we must distribute books. Prabhupada wants us to distribute books. Practically everyone, I remember in London, I was based in London in those days, and everyone would go out distributing books. It was only those devotees who somehow were physically not able, really, excuse me, to distribute books. They would stay back and cook and worship the deities. But otherwise, everyone went out. It was huge. And the effect of that was huge. You know, in England, where I was, the book distribution picked up more and more. Like I said, 74, 75, 76, 77. Then even after Prabhupada left this world, 78, 79, the book distribution was massive. Just for England, which has the same population as South Africa, plus or minus, when we would print a book, we print generally not less than 100,000 and usually 250,000. And then we had 10 or more teams of devotees traveling the UK, just doing book distribution. So every week, I would say every week we're doing probably 100,000 books. And the impact of that was so profound that our temples filled up with devotees. You may not be familiar with Bhaktivedanta Manor. Perhaps a few of you are. But in Bhaktivedanta Manor, at the peak, we had about 300 devotees living, and all coming from the book distribution, because in the backs of the books would be the addresses and directions and invitations. Come and visit us. So in Bhaktivedanta Manor, the devotee rooms, like the brahmachari quarters upstairs, the ladies' quarters upstairs, they're all just packed out completely. And the temple room at night was just full of devotees because there was nowhere else to sleep. And the prasadam room was full of devotees. Everything was full of devotees. And Prabhupada made that point, that if we just distribute his books, then people will become devotees. And we saw it with our own eyes. People were just becoming devotees. It was like an avalanche. So here in South Africa, we have a similar population quantitatively. And I feel as co-GBC, I've been GBC since 98, but now Govardhana Prabhu has joined us co-GBC. And I feel it's extremely important that we promote the production of the books in English and in local languages. And we do our best to organize the distribution of the books. Like when I joined in England, there was one party of 4 devotees going out and distributing books. The rest of us, we went out on Harinam every day. But gradually, as the significance of book distribution kind of sunk in, as these messages from Prabhupada were coming out every so often, then it really became very clear we have to put emphasis on book distribution. And like I said, we did. And it worked. So let us see here in South Africa how we can do the same thing. Even though the times have changed in certain respects, but on another level, the times haven't changed. Krishna consciousness is still the eternal truth. People are still eternal spirit souls, eternal servants of Krishna. And if they have contact with Krishna in suitable ways, then people will become devotees. They definitely will. All that's really missing is us to just go out, to make the outreach, to make the effort, to produce the books, and then particularly to distribute the books in great quantity. So again, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this wonderful program, such a wonderful program. And please remember, this is, you could say, this is my message. This is my message as someone who's had personal experience of the effects of book distribution in developing the Krishna consciousness movement. Please let us all try and get some focus together like that, more and more, and then facilitate that in practical ways. And I guarantee, absolutely, we will see an explosion of Krishna consciousness in South Africa and throughout Africa, an explosion in the form of more and more people becoming devotees and practicing Krishna consciousness very seriously. So thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki. Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj ki. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. His Holiness Srila Bhakti Caitanya Maharaj ki jai. Thank you so much for joining us. I love what you said, Maharaj, how although times have changed, Krishna consciousness remains an eternal truth. So with that message, I'd just like to extend my gratitude again to you, Maharaj, for joining us today. Hare Krishna. Now on to the main part of our program of the session today, this morning. We have as our main speaker for the session entitled Connecting to Srila Prabhupada Through His Books. As we've just heard from His Holiness Bhakti Caitanya Maharaj about the importance of, or the emphasis that Prabhupada placed on his books. And in order for us to actually go out and give the world this message that Srila Prabhupada has encapsulated in these books, we ourselves need to connect with Srila Prabhupada. And what better way can we connect with Srila Prabhupada through his books? So to discuss that topic with us today and to share that wisdom with us, we have His Grace Govardhana Prabhu, whom I'll introduce. Govardhana Prabhu is the senior trustee of the African BBT. He's also a trustee in the global BBT. He is the BBT trustee responsible for Back to Godhead magazine. And as Maharaj has pointed out, Govardhana Prabhu is also the co-GBC of South Africa and Mauritius. So without any further ado, Govardhana Prabhu will hand over to you so that we can hear this wisdom from you. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Mukundangiri Prabhu. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnananjanan Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam jena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Caitanya Manubhishtam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Shwapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Shahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Shahagana Lalita Shri Vishakavitam Shah Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gourange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Shate Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaivracha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ajana Lambita Pujo Kanakavadhato Shankirtanika Pitaro Kamalayataksho Vishwambaro Dijamaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priya Karo Karunaravatar. Thank you very much, Bhakti Prabhu. Hare Krishna. So thank you again and welcome to this very unique virtual format that brings us all together on online Sangha. Traditionally, these conferences were held in specific geographical locations, but now we have the opportunity to be together online at one spot. Of course, the BBT Africa team has lined up a very exciting schedule over 2 days, 5 time slots a day, 16 speakers, Hare Krishna. And so we have 12 hours of pure book katha, pure book nectar. Of course, my brief this morning is twofold. I am going to provide a very brief summary of the work of the African BBT in the last year, which I'm very happy to do. And number two, to say something about getting closer to Srila Prabhupada through his books. Of course, the key objective of this conference is to stimulate a dialogue on all matters of our family business. Our family business meaning book production and book distribution. We want to give energy to book distribution, as Maharaj was just saying. We want to vitalize, we want to focus, refocus our energy on Srila Prabhupada's most fundamental order: distribute my books. Importantly, once a year, we also come before the devotees to account, and to report what has happened, what has transpired in the previous year. So, as this is a very important aspect of this conference. As Krishna's devotees and followers of Srila Prabhupada, every single devotee is a transcendental shareholder, and we have a duty to come before you and report and account to you what we have done and what is possible that could be done after taking your inputs. So while the details of all the work that the African BBT has done, which is a lot of work, is in its annual report, which is on the BBT Africa website, I want to just take a few moments to underline some very important headline information. Firstly, as a sign of institutional maturity, as a sign of care for the BBT, good governance, succession planning, we now have at the helm, as the executive head of the African BBT, the youngest person in any BBT across the world, in any BBT division across the world, the youngest person, our Mukundangri. He is the executive head of the African BBT. So you see, he's got a pair of fresh eyes, lots of youthful energy, new ideas, new approaches, and the African BBT under his care is charging ahead. So we're delighted to share such happy news. And Mukundangri Prabhu, we thank you very much for taking on this serious responsibility for Srila Prabhupada. Notably, the African BBT has been developing stronger collaboration. You would see now we have Chinese and Arabic books coming into the frontier markets. The world print run of Back to Godhead magazine remains here in Johannesburg, managed by the African BBT. The BBT Africa team, under the care of Bhakti Hemant, has taken full responsibility for producing the annual Pan-African edition of Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja book. At the end of 2019, the African BBT had 24 titles in production. And translations that were done, one of the highlights would be the completion of the Amharic Sri Ishopanishad. This is a language of Ethiopia. 26 million people speak Ethiopian, the language Amharic, and there's 3 million in the diaspora. So it's a very important language, and we're very happy to report that we've done last year, or this year, the Ishopanishad. What's even more exciting is that we've commenced with the translation of Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is into isiZulu, which is now up to the 9th chapter. It is really my very sincere desire and wish that we're able to print this book this year to round off the 2020 year. Of course, BBT Africa is also partnering with other authors, bringing new titles to African soil, and you'll get to hear about this in the next 2 days because we have the authors themselves who are sharing this information about their books. Of course, Srila Prabhupada said, whenever there's any publication in any language, it enlivens me 100 times. So we're very happy to do this for Srila Prabhupada's pleasure. And we encourage other authors, particularly African authors, to come forward and work with the African BBT to produce more titles. In 2019, for the 2019 year, the global BBT facilitated the distribution of 8 million pieces of literature. As you would expect, 65% of that was done by India or Asia. Africa's contribution, 3% or about 250,000 books, or 9% if you exclude India. We would like to be at about 20%. That means that we have a lot of work to do to double our baseline to about 560,000 books a year. And we're looking to our newly formed Shastra Dan entity, headed up by our Rupa Goswami Prabhu, to bridge much of that gap. This is a special innovation, special effort to structure an intervention that will help us distribute books. Because Srila Prabhupada wanted African language books to be distributed at cost. So we take it, it is a big market for Shastra Dan, and we have sharpened our effort in that area. We also remain very strongly committed to environmental care. You would notice every book that the BBT produces will always use FSC paper for sustainable publishing, acid-free paper, in line with global publishing standards. So all in all, I think the African BBT's results for the 2019 year was very pleasing. As I said, we come to you as your servants. So if there's an idea or suggestion you have, kindly direct it to us so we can better serve you. Of course, it was Srila Prabhupada who triggered a resurgence of bhakti. To Srila Prabhupada who triggered a resurgence of bhakti in the West, mainly through his books. The more books means more devotees. So now let's just consider how we can stay connected to Srila Prabhupada through his books. Srila Prabhupada's position in ISKCON is very unique. He is the Siksha Guru for all times. And at least for the duration, we hear this term, the next 10,000 years, the golden age in Kali Yuga. I couldn't quite find the exact reference where Srila Prabhupada said that, but if we say that the next 10,000 years are special, and if we take a generation to be 30 years, that means we have 330,000 generations to go before we reach the end of 10,000 years. Or if we take a generation to be 60 years, that means we have 167,000 generations to go. And maybe, just maybe, 167,000 gurus added to Srila Prabhupada's lineage. Now, we are in the dense darkness of Kali Yuga. In the traditional Vedic system, there was an oral tradition from the spiritual master to the disciple. And we today, we are interspersed as devotees all across the earth planet. We have different influences, different cultures, different flavors. So one can well imagine the very real possibility of a deviation of some sort, a nuanced change, or some charismatic personality appearing in 200 years' time, or maybe in 100 years' time, trying to tweak something that Srila Prabhupada has given. So the preservation of doctrinal integrity is key in keeping Srila Prabhupada's sacred teachings and his instructions and his directions to the core of everything that we do. If we consider an example, if we consider Srila Prabhupada, how he transplanted such an ancient science of deity worship, a very complex aspect of devotional service, but as the Acharya, as Krishna's personal servitor, he was fully competent to make decisions on behalf of the Supreme Lord, and he did. You'll find cases where Srila Prabhupada normally takes, in most of our temples, the deities take rest between 1 to 4 p.m. every day. In Srila Prabhupada's time when he was here with us, on the request of the devotees, there were lots of people coming to the temple. So to increase the darshan time, to increase the preaching, they approached Srila Prabhupada and asked Srila Prabhupada if the deities could be open for a longer period of time. So Srila Prabhupada agreed, and he reduced the Lord's resting time to 1 hour. Later on, of course, Srila Prabhupada formalized and standardized deity worship across the world. But at the time, the devotees were very inexperienced, very young. Even on one occasion in Germany, where a small Radha Krishna deities were being installed, one of the leaders had given a lady the Gayatri mantra, so she could serve the deity, because you have to be a Brahmin to serve the deity. Of course, Srila Prabhupada was very astonished and told this devotee, "You cannot give anyone second initiation." And the devotee responded, as a matter of fact, "Well, no, I gave her the Gayatri mantra." Prabhupada then insisted that you cannot give anyone the Gayatri mantra. Srila Prabhupada asked this devotee to please call this lady and tell her that she's not a Brahmin. So these were the growing pains. The new movement, Srila Prabhupada is giving personal training to a group of very enthusiastic devotees. And Srila Prabhupada was very liberal on behalf of Krishna. Now, after 50 years, the movement is very well represented, well grounded. The kind of philosophical scaffolding has been removed. We're on a growth trajectory. And Prabhupada says everything is in his books. Everything is in his books. So to insulate ourselves spiritually and to broadcast the message to others, our primary dependence is on Srila Prabhupada's books. Srila Prabhupada was one of the most accomplished and pure adherents of what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave. That philosophical underpinning of the Gaudiya tradition is a very complex, therefore requires a teacher, the stature of Srila Prabhupada, to adjust things to give to the world. Srila Prabhupada, of course, was a very special emissary of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prabhupada was initiated, as you know, in 1932. And immediately, it took him 12 years, he started BTG. Another 9 years, he started the League of Devotees. By his own Vyasa Puja in 1966, when Srila Prabhupada was in America and New York, he had initiated the first 11 disciples. Today, we have millions of practicing devotees. And the core text, the core reference point is Srila Prabhupada's book. When Srila Prabhupada left India, he only had one disciple. But when he arrived in the USA, people could sense his aura, his saintliness. Some even commented that here was an old man who was not touched by age. That's the kind of personality Srila Prabhupada was. In one letter, in 1934, 12th of December, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wrote to Srila Prabhupada. He said, I'm fully convinced that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments. I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher. Now, when Srila Prabhupada was in Vrindavan in the late 50s, one head priest, Mahant, recalled that Srila Prabhupada always wanted to speak in English. And most of the people there would speak Bengali and Hindi. And they would very politely refuse Srila Prabhupada. And this person recalled how Srila Prabhupada was saying that he's going to go to America. Some rich industrialist was going to sponsor him. And this Mahant from this temple says, but it was child's fantasy. Very innocent and very improbable. Nobody believed in Vrindavan that Srila Prabhupada would be that Senapati. So how wrong that person was, how blessed you and I are. Most of us have only met Srila Prabhupada through the pages of his books. So logically, we might ask, why did Srila Prabhupada translate the Srimad Bhagavatam the hours at the Radha Damodar temple and translate it into English? For whom was he translating it? Well, he was on a mission and he was empowered to deliver that mission. Srila Prabhupada was empowered by his spiritual master to deliver that mission. Each night he arose, middle of the night, on our account, on my account, on your account, for us and for those that will still to come in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. And he said that everything is in my books. So the flavor, that brand of Krishna consciousness is uniquely Srila Prabhupada's. He was the link that caused other links, which will cause more links in the future, and to the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. So it is his points of emphasis, Srila Prabhupada's points of emphasis. And he will continue to remain the inspiration for ISKCON devotees in the future, today and in the future. So his story of delivering on a prophecy is very astonishing. If we read about it, it's quite unbelievable. That's why Srila Prabhupada is notably special. That unique specialness is eternally captured in the pages of Srila Prabhupada's books. So if we want to get to know that personality, get to know his perspective, his brand of devotion, we have to spend a lot of time through the pages of his books. So that particular theological perspective, that line of sight, the lens through which we get a perspective on all finer details of devotional life, that all comes through Srila Prabhupada. So as a member of ISKCON, being a member of ISKCON means that we are aligned to what Srila Prabhupada wanted. Now, whatever Srila Prabhupada's desires were is recorded in his books. Whatever instructions he gave are recorded in his books. And the books carry a message, carry this message. They're the embodiments of Srila Prabhupada's words and his heart. So if we want to get close to Srila Prabhupada's instructions, close to Srila Prabhupada's heart, we have to go through his books. So word by word, line by line, paragraph by paragraph, book by book, over 60 titles. Srila Prabhupada made a very ancient tradition accessible in a very easy way. And he gave particular interpretation of these devotional texts through his commentaries. So it's particular that his commentaries of the Bhaktivedanta purports is Srila Prabhupada's particular gift to ourselves. Srila Prabhupada said that he'll live forever through his books. And this is a very profound statement. So we can be grateful to the Global BBT. Every year they fund and maintain the Bhaktivedanta archives, which is the part of the BBT that digitalizes and keeps all of Srila Prabhupada's books safely for the future generations. This way we can be sure that all of Srila Prabhupada's books are eternalized, digitalized and eternalized. So Srila Prabhupada's books is every devotee's inheritance. It's your inheritance, it's mine. Srila Prabhupada willed that, and he wanted us to read his books, and he wanted us to share it with others. Each book is a special gift. It's packed with potency. It's packed with very specific instructions. At times of when we are down, it gives us solace. They're very wise words, and it's an inspiration to last a lifetime. Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, the foundational text, now translated over 60 languages. As I said earlier on, the African BBT is really looking forward to translating the isiZulu Bhagavad Gita this year, completing their translation. So like all other BBTs in the world, from the Chinese BBT to the Latin American BBT to the Far East, Middle East BBT, the future generation of devotees will receive their inheritance, and they'll receive their inheritance in their mother tongue. That's the objective of the BBT. Their connection will be made, their connection will blossom. All the pages of Srila Prabhupada's books and his special commentaries will be accessible to anyone on this planet. So Srila Prabhupada's books is really a work of a spiritual genius, the way he has presented it for our understanding. You would know that Srila Prabhupada, he delivered something like 2,200 lectures. He gave 1,300 recorded conversations and 6,000 letters. These are not emails. These are each one personalized, responding to somebody signed by Srila Prabhupada as your ever well-wisher. And all of this, plus whatever Srila Prabhupada spoke from the Vyasa side, is in a book form. So our wireless connection to Srila Prabhupada is through this network of pages in Srila Prabhupada's books. Ultimately, Srila Prabhupada, he inherited the impulse of preaching from his Guru Maharaj. We inherit the impulse of preaching from our respective spiritual masters through Srila Prabhupada. And he said that don't divert your mind from book distribution. Don't divert your mind from book distribution. He saw book distribution to be a sign of spiritual strength. Srila Prabhupada saw the big distribution of big books to be a sign of spiritual strength. So reading the books will purify our intelligence, will purify our heart, and reading keeps us in check between those yellow safety lines of devotional practice, and we can stay connected to Srila Prabhupada in that way. We must stay connected to his books, to his instructions, to his devotees, stay within the shelter of ISKCON, and the books are the foundational basis theologically that helps us move forward spiritually. In conclusion, I wanted to just say that sometimes when you are very close to a mountain, a very huge, majestic mountain, you cannot appreciate the beauty or the majesty of that mountain. As you step further back, you get better focus. In the same way, Srila Prabhupada, he was a very majestic personality. And he will become more and more appreciated with the passing of time. As time passes, Srila Prabhupada's contribution to society, to the world, will become more pronounced. Particularly his books like the Srimad Bhagavatam will rise in prominence and will be a beacon of hope for a very misguided world. So all we need to do to make sure is that all of Srila Prabhupada's books are within hand reach, within digital reach of every citizen on this planet. And that's the work of the BBT, to make sure that books are available. That means making Srila Prabhupada available. If last year we distributed 8 million books, that means we've introduced Srila Prabhupada to 8 million people. In Africa, there are 1 billion people. We've distributed 250,000 books. 50% is Arabic, of course, in Africa. That means we've introduced Srila Prabhupada to 250,000 people. If we can introduce Srila Prabhupada to 1 million people a year, what a blessing that would be. That is the whole objective for us to come together on these conferences, to see, strategize, sharpen our tools, and develop strategies to expand the book distribution. You know, ISKCON and the BBT are like two wings of the same bird. Prabhupada said that the BBT and ISKCON, BBT is his heart, ISKCON is his body. And we pray by Srila Prabhupada's blessings that we can continue to work in a very glorious way, that we can increase book distribution, work very closely with all temple presidents, with the GBCs, have plans for each area, city by city. And in that way, we'll please Srila Prabhupada intensely. And of course, for ourselves, those of us who might be more familiar, we have to take time to read Srila Prabhupada's books. The only way to connect to Srila Prabhupada is through his books. So Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you.
Thank you so much, Govardhana Prabhu. Thank you for those words, which were both practical and spiritually relevant to us all. I really love your take on Krishna consciousness. It's not abstract, it's very practical. We have a few questions that have been sent to us by our online viewers. Perhaps you and I can tackle them as a team. So the first question that we have is a question I believe that we received on Facebook. Is someone asked, I am a writer, how can I get in contact with the BBT? So I can tackle that one, Govardhana. So we'll share our contact details with everyone at the end of this session. There'll be a screen at the end of each session showing our contact details. And because you're a writer, there's a lot to look forward to in today's session. We have an author of one of our latest productions, Wise Love, coming up late in the day, Her Grace Pranada Mataji. So please do stay tuned for that. That will be on at 4 p.m. South African time. The second question, and it's something that you'd be familiar with, Govardhana Prabhu. The question, has or is there a plan for the African BBT to tackle audiobooks?
Yes, there is a plan. I think we in terms of our digital pursuits, in terms of us having more successes in that area, we were a little slow. We have, the global BBT very easily produces like digital books. It's something we need to work on. If somebody has those expertise and those skills and would want to work with us, Mukundangri Prabhu is the person to contact. But it's an area of focus going forward, very sharp focus going forward, because we see in Africa that there are more cell phones than people who can access through the internet, for example. So preaching strategy would mean that we have to find a way of going online and particularly using mobile technology. And of course, ebooks also, but in that band, there's a whole cluster of interventions that are required. But whoever the question came from, we'd love to hear from you. There is a team, I think Hemant is heading up that team. So you can contact us and we put you in touch with Hemant and we can work together to try and move that part of our agenda forward. Yeah?
Thank you. I can also just add on to that, we have just finished we are almost nearing the end of the production process of our first audiobook in Amharic, which is an Ethiopian language. And that is due for release, our first BBT Africa audiobook during the course of this year. So there's one final question for us, Govardhana Prabhu. Another online question. Can you share the reach with African language books? Maybe if I could rephrase that question, what's the reach with our current translations in terms of African language books? I can share from my perspective, and then you can also share, Govardhana Prabhu. In terms of the translations, which include books and pamphlets that the African BBT has tackled, we have amassed, I think, just under 20 African languages in total, which include indigenous South African languages and languages, continental languages as well. Now, Govardhana Prabhu can speak a little bit about how this is just a drop in the ocean in terms of the reach that we need to have in the African continent.
You see, Srila Prabhupada gave 3 very specific instructions when he came to South Africa. Build a temple in Chatsworth, which we did, install Jagannath deities. And then he said, we've got to preach to the local people. And that meant books. He also put a very particular formula down. You would be interested to know that the African BBT, by Prabhupada's order, Prabhupada gave the instruction that the books have to be sold at cost. So they can go out as widely as possible. So high quality books at cost. So in Africa, there are 2,100 languages. Mukundangiri Prabhu said we've got to 20. So I'm glad Mukundangiri Prabhu is a young man, because in my lifetime, I don't know if we're going to get to 2,100. But, you know, most certainly we have a lot of devotional service to try and get to that number. I must also say, I was in Botswana once, and I was in a lift, and I was in my Doti in Kruta for a program, and there was a very distinguished gentleman in that lift, and he started to ask me, you know, what is all this about? So I started to speak to him, and then we got to the reception area where we were staying, and I said, I have something for you. And I went to the car, and we had translated a Setswana book, which I brought for him. And of course, he was an economist, very educated person. And we had a very good course. When I gave him this book, his first comment to me was, don't you have one in English? So, you know, we, in the urban areas, clearly English is the kind of spoken language. But by Srila Prabhupada's order, we have to get to, you know, every year to get more into the mother tongue, because Prabhupada wanted that. Like, for example, isiZulu Bhagavad Gita, really speaking, in our first 10 years, we should have got a isiZulu Bhagavad Gita and a Kosa Bhagavad Gita. But we're starting it now, and we will finish it. And yes, thank you for raising that question. Very, very good question. Thank you.
No,
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for your contribution there, Govardhana Prabhu. So thank you to all who attended this first session of the BBT Africa online conference. We look forward to having you for more of our sessions later today. There's just one more question that has been posted by an online attendee. Let's tackle that quickly. It reads, with distributing books on a digital platform, it may be a lot more difficult to convince someone to purchase books. How would it be acceptable to provide digital versions of books for free or by donation? Okay, so that's a very pertinent question considering where the world is right now. Wouldn't you say, Govardhana Prabhu? But you can touch on it with some of the thoughts that you might have on the topic, but I do know we have a very, very specific session designed for this tomorrow. We'll have His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu on discussing this topic about book distribution in all circumstances. So for the person who posed that question, which is such a pertinent and relevant question for our time today, please tune into that session tomorrow with His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu. But if you'd like to maybe shed a little bit of light on it, Govardhana Prabhu, preempting that session with Vaisheshika Prabhu.
I tell you, Vaisheshika Prabhu has done a lot of work. Global BBT has done a lot of work. A lot of books are being distributed now because of COVID-19 through that platform also. I don't want to do an injustice to what Vaisheshika Prabhu will share, but I can tell you, don't miss Vaisheshika Prabhu's session.
Yeah.
Don't miss Vaisheshika Prabhu's session.
Right, and with that, thank you again. Our contact details will be shared at the end of this session. Our next session will commence at 12 Central African time, South African time. You can reference that from wherever you're watching in the world, and we'll be joined by His Holiness Bhakti Charudeshna Maharaj from West Africa, a very senior devotee of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, and he'll be speaking about the spiritual dawn of Africa. So speaking about what we really need to do on the continent in order to galvanize our efforts, mobilize our efforts, and come and basically turn ourselves into the book distribution hub of the world. There are over 800 million souls living in Africa, and we've only just touched the top of the iceberg in terms of distribution and reach with Srila Prabhupada's books and Lord Chaitanya's mercy. So tune into that. It promises to be a very exciting discussion on the topic of book distribution. And with that, I would thank you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, and we'll catch you later. Hare Krishna.